for the Wednesday Night Golf Show from awesomehome.com. You know the deal. Myself, Ben Razza, here with Jason Roslin. Houston Open. We're going to do the best I can. I already did one of these yesterday. I'm still standing. One more for good old times. But how goes it?
Yeah, man, I got to be honest. Talking twice about the Houston Open. What I'll do for you, though, because I'm feeling nice, we'll mix in some Italian Open talk like at the end. Just so we can mix it up just a little. Plus, they actually might have, I don't know what, because there's been plenty of good tournaments before this on the European Tour. Maybe they just listened to the industry and said, hey, just give us $5K up top at something. And that's what they did this week. So, I mean, that's something to at least.
Not bad. Right? And the field is certainly better over there, but we will get into all that. I do want to say right off the top, our friends at Fantasydraft sponsoring the show, which we do appreciate. They're the only place where you can play break-free daily fantasy, 100% of entry fees. You guys know this by now. Going into the pool, and it makes a huge difference. We've seen some big scores over there. And like I said, if you're trying to grind up and build the bankroll, no better place to do it. So if you haven't signed up, if you want to, promo code AWESOMO, you get a 7-day free trial. But man, so we're going to get into everything. We've got a little weather to talk about. I don't think it's too crazy, which is nice. But it does get windy in Houston. I guess right off the top, what do you make of just the broad strokes of this tournament?
Yeah, so really interesting that the first time, now the PGA Tour, not every single week, puts out what they call the GSCAA. And oh man, I used to know what this stands for. It has something to do with like Superintendents Associations of America. Superintendent, of course, for people that may not know or may not know golf, well, superintendents are the ones that take care of the golf course and cut the grass and make the grass. Well, I looked at the ones from every year for the last 4 years when the Houston Open was played before the Masters, and sure enough, the greens were bent POA, which they should be because of Augusta POA, of course. But this year, everything has switched back to Bermuda. So right off the top, we're going to see a completely different golf course in that regard. Also, there's been talks out of that same superintendent area that they've got rid of all these shaved off areas around the greens that, again, was preparing golfers for Augusta the following week. So you should see around the green be much easier. You should see the green surfaces with the Bermuda probably bring in these bad putters a little more. So, yeah, overall, it's probably going to play pretty different, but it's an interesting time in Houston. It's obviously changing of the seasons. It's changing the season there. I see you with your sweatshirt on up there, Ben. So obviously
it's cold up here.
It's getting a little cold everywhere, except for obviously in the sun of Florida. With that, though, looks like we're going to have some weather. And 2 weeks ago, we talked a lot about this, and I played the weather. I'm not sure if you did, but I know I played the weather, and it worked out terribly for me. They ended up blowing the horn before that second group came up. I'm a little nervous that we're going to have something similar this week. So what it looks like right now, just for people that haven't looked, we've got Thursday morning, looks fine, looks pretty normal, 11 to 15 mile per hour winds, gusting, not too bad. That's pretty much nothing. But it's Friday morning at about 10 a.m. where the temperature drops about 25 degrees. And this is pretty much where it's going, and it looks like there's a cold front coming in. I talked to somebody in our Slack chat that lives in Houston, gets a lot more information than I do, and he stated, Christian in our Slack chat, stated to me that basically the weather is going to come in the morning, the rain showers and such, which is then going to make it much colder. So we could actually see a delay in the morning for those PM AM wave, which could get pushed back to the bad weather or the bad wind. So a lot to play with here. What make of it a view of at least what you've seen so far?
Yeah, it's a big mess. I mean, when we're talking about not just wind, when you bring in rain, you bring in possible delays. And the other thing, when it looks like it's going to be bad weather early Thursday, I tend to treat that a little more seriously because when I wake up tomorrow, I can look and they can say there's bad weather coming in 3 hours. Some of the problems here, this is Friday afternoon. That's a long time. So once it locks, it locks. And if that weather changes, obviously you can't adjust. So I tend to say, I'm not going to try to mess around. I'm building in clusters as I do a lot, on some of my teams, but I'm not necessarily targeting a specific time frame. The Friday AM, there's a window where that's going to be helpful. But at the same time, as you just talked about, all it takes is one unknown variable and it all changes. And I saw it 2 weeks ago, I was with you. The horn blew and everything blew up right in my face.
Yeah, again, I hate to have that happen again to me and try and stack and I can give a couple of names off the top, then we can go into breaking them down, of course. But like for example, we see the power pairing, and I say power pairing, it just really shows the field of Daniel Berger, Keegan Bradley, and Kevin Chappell. They're scheduled in this PMA wave. They're scheduled to go off 7:55 on Friday morning. That's actually the ones that I'm a little nervous about. If they don't catch good weather and they catch these thunderstorms, they're going to be pushed back a couple of hours. That's going to push them right back into this bad weather. So obviously, if they end up playing through everything, they could end up getting the better draw. But I think that's the more I say to you, it's the more I'm not really going to look at it this week, because it looks like it's going to be a little bit more than wind. It's going to come with rain. It's going to come with thunderstorms. And we know that normally means delays.
Yeah, I think that's, you can't go crazy with the weather. We've seen it really not materialize a lot. And then there's going to be weeks where we say, I don't see much, and it's going to materialize. That's just the nature of the beast. So in a tournament like this where we got enough on our hands to deal with, I'm not going to get crazy about it. Wind does play a factor in Houston. But as you kind of talked about, and I'm just going to repeat it a little bit, this tournament used to be the warm up to the Masters, so that's April. We're in October now. The course is going to look a little different. Some of the aspects are going to change. So that makes it that much different. And the field certainly isn't what we see as the lead into the Masters either. We have a god awful field to deal with.
Yeah, and I think that's a little bit too. The schedule, again, we're heading to Asia after this week for 3 straight weeks. So, first of all, this show is actually going to become live before lock. After this week, we're going to get 10:30 p.m. locks on Wednesday night. So, interesting just to note there, the show will change. We'll literally basically lead right up into lock. Maybe we'll change it at 1 days or change the time. But contest sizes are a little smaller because we don't have as much time, obviously, to prepare for it. But we're here focusing on this week. So, all right, so let's jump into the players. Henrik Stenson, I'll start off with something interesting that I found about him. 2 pieces of information. And this is when you know it's a slow golf week. One of the big stories is Henrik Stenson's giving up his 3-wood. And then Henrik Stenson is telling you that if he's the odds favorite, we might want to reconsider it. Now, golfers like to have fun with this. Victor Hovland told us to go smoke weed, or we're smoking too much weed because we had him at the top of the board. So certainly golfers like to have fun with it. But what do you make of Stenson's comments at all? Does it make you more apt to play him or less apt to play him? Or neither?
Probably neither, to tell you the truth. I wasn't that interested to begin. And Stenson is that kind of guy. Not that I know him, but he seems, he likes to play into it. He's pretty dry, witty humor. So I'm not stunned to see him kind of say, the game is, I don't even know where it is, and then come out and play pretty well. But at the same time, I looked at the Vegas odds, and he is the overwhelming favorite in terms of where he's at, but I just don't see it. He's not coming off a long layoff. He's the type of guy, he's been around. He's worried about gearing up for a season, not winning the Houston Open. I'm not saying he doesn't want to play well, but for me, it was a pretty easy pass at the top. If he burns me, he burns me. He's a great player, but I want to see kind of where his game rebounds on a year aspect. Last year was the first maybe ever that he lost strokes off the tee. That was a big step back for him. You mentioned he's kind of working on some things right now, so we'll see where he is. But I found myself paying down.
Yeah, and ownership should be coming out here within the next hour from the guys. I will tell you, in my ownership projections that I do myself are not nearly as good as theirs, but I've got Stenson as like second or third on the board of highest owned guys, being the highest priced guy. I will say, if you're playing over on Fanduel and on Fantasydraft as well, he might be a little bit less expensive than he is on DK at 11.4. DraftKings just seems like they have to put somebody up above that 11.2 ratio, no matter how strict the field is. But Stenson, and even Cam Champ, as Alex, our buddy here, Ostimo, he put out a tweet saying Cam Champ might be the biggest misprice of the entire season. What do you make of that? Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like something I would say.
Yeah, it really is.
Just, now Cam Champ, he's impressive, he's winning here and there. I'm just not sure that his strategy of just taking apart off the tee here, I think it's very important to gain off the tee. Maybe one of the most important aspects of the week, but you're going to have to do more than that, and it can't just be straight bombing. So I'm not paying across the board in every site. I don't care. I'm not going to him either. So what does that mean? It means I'm mostly playing the next 3. We got Harman, Berger, and Henley. I definitely started a bunch of teams with them or nobody and paid down like a lot of people will.
Yeah, and here's the thing about Cam Champ at 10.8, and maybe I'll make a really quick reference. He's incredible off the tee, but if you take away off the tee, he's like Jordan Spieth. He's just a really good putter. And when really good putters putt bad, they miss the cut. For example, Bo Hostler, right? He gained strokes putting in like every event except for 3 last year. And he missed the cut in all of those 3 that he didn't gain stroke putting because it's their only way. And we'll talk about Bo Hostler in a little bit. We'll talk about Denny McCarthy here in a little bit.
Well, that guy.
Throw Kevin Na into this feature as well, right? These are guys that if they putt bad, their skills are not good enough, at least currently right now, to have something else get them through the cut. Last week, Cam Champ lost almost 3 strokes putting in his first 2 rounds. And off the tee is fine. It's just not going to be good enough to make up for a bad putting round. So I would rather play Stenson over Champ, even with the ownership heavily favoring Stenson this week. Then it gets to the next 3 guys that I think a lot of people are going to find one of these guys to start their lineups with. Brian Harman's approaches have been phenomenal. I mean, 3 straight in the fall season, gaining over 3.5 strokes. 10.6, though, on a course that he really doesn't do well. I mean, nothing above, 52nd place. Do you think that's more of a course fit, or do you think that's more of when the season was and he just maybe wasn't informed then?
So, that's the thing with course history. It's tricky because you can use it both ways, and sometimes you bias yourself by justifying it, where I say, oh, look at this guy. Look at Russell Henley. He obviously loves this course. There's something about it. And then I look at Brian Harman and I say, well, it's a change of the year and they're changing the course aspects, and I don't worry too much that he hasn't played well here, but he hasn't. He's lost consistently on the approaches, and he comes into this tournament, as you just referenced, on fire with the approaches. So something has to give. We'll see if his recent form can maybe carry him, and I tend to lean on that merit rather than thinking for some reason he doesn't like the layout here. So I have some Harman. He's just playing too good, and there's not enough options for me up top.
So I did find myself thinking that the ownership was going to come in right around that 20% number just because there's not that many options, as you said. And as much as I like Brian Harman, I found myself playing more Russell Henley. I did skip over your guy because he's also – yeah, no, I think Danny Berger is also in play this week as well. Obviously, the course history for him has been absolutely fantastic on a setup that's not supposed to be his favorite, right? Coming from Florida State guy. He's supposed to be a Bermuda guy. So at the beginning of the week, I said in our Awesemo Slack chat that, man, this might be my worst nightmare and Danny Berger might win. But if he figures out his approaches, he really might win.
Everything else has been great. And he's playing actually pretty well overall. The irons are not where they need to be. So we'll see. I mean, this is one of the strongest. Now I'm moving to Russell Henley. One of the strongest course histories of any player anywhere.
Yeah.
He's just been automatic for and somebody. I don't know where I heard this. So whoever said it, forgive me. He's come into this tournament in past years, sometimes playing great, sometimes playing poor. It doesn't seem to matter. We're talking about 5 straight top 10s with a win in 2017. It seems like no matter what, wherever the game is, he gets to the Houston Open, and it's just all systems go.
Yeah, it's really incredible. And another great stat that I heard this week from Nat Jones, he mentioned on the podcast. He's one of the leaders in strokes gained, of courses over 7,400 yards. Whereas if you look at the courses we've just played that are all 7,100 yards, he has made the cut in all 3 of them, but nothing great. It requires a lot of wedge game, obviously, and that's not the strength of Henley's game. Obviously, Henley's strength of his game is the 200-plus yardage proximity, and that's probably why he finds himself doing so well here. You just don't have as many wedge opportunities as you do at other courses. Also, the irons they've been, I'll say, normal Russell Henley, which is inconsistent and gets hot. Thing is that when he gets hot, he normally stays hot for at least one more start. The last time before the Shriners last week where he gained almost 8 strokes was the 3M in the John Deere where he went back-to-back, gaining just about 6 strokes on the approaches. And then before that was the Valero and RBC, where, again, he went back-to-back, gaining just about 3 strokes and 5 strokes on the approaches. So I like that he's getting hot with his irons because I feel like that might be the worst part of his game. He's got a sound short game, and obviously putts well here.
No, I mean he's a guy who's been frustrating for a lot of people, but we know when he gets going, not just at the Houston Open, just in general, he is a top end player relative to this field. So you're going to have options. You're not going to feel comfortable. I know we're all in the same boat. You're not going to make lineups where you look and you say, wow, 6 quality guys. There's not 6 quality guys. If there was no salary cap and you can take anyone, I still would have teams I feel pretty bad about, to be honest. So
no doubt about it.
what are you doing with Scottie Scheffler though? Because he's going to be a lightning rod, not just for ownership, but just in general. He's allergic to the weekend right now. He finds it and then he collapses. What do you make of kind of where his game is at, and are you starting teams with him?
So I think last week was the first time where we saw him totally give up after getting himself out of the tournament, right? He got through the cut pretty handily. I think it was 7 or 8 under, which put him maybe 4 back, and he was going out Saturday, earlier than most people, and just absolutely tanked. And then if you go look at the shot tracker, it almost looked like he was just, not caring. He knew he wasn't going to win. He was out of contention. I don't know what to make of it because his statistical numbers, everything was bad. Off the tee was even bad. He lost strokes on the approach. He lost strokes around the green. He lost strokes putting. It's not that great. First time here, I know he's a Texas guy, right? It's a tough one. I'm paying $200 more for Russell Henley this week. I think Scottie Scheffler has tremendous talent, but I feel like we're going to get a little bit less ownership on Russell Henley. And I think Russell Henley's in maybe a little bit better form. It'll be interesting to see Scottie Scheffler bounce back from a really bad week. Everything statistically, placement-wise, he finished last week. So, 9,900, maybe people don't go to him. But at 9,700, Pat Perez sitting right below him, who had 8 strokes gained putting last week. What do we do about that?
I don't know if I can do that. Scheffler, I do think that it's still a guy I feel pretty comfortable with, just the way he can strike the ball. It's going to be a telling week, though. If he follows that up and he misses a cut here, maybe we do see some struggles from him. If he bounces back, it'd be pretty impressive to see him get right back at it after a couple bad rounds. Pat Perez, he was impressive. When you gain 8 strokes putting, that's going to do it as well. But the rest of the game was pretty solid. That's more of a fluke. Now, you talked about before about, how putting, it's hard to rely on that. It is. But Denny McCarthy is truly, I couldn't pick him out of a lineup of 2, but his stats don't lie that he's an incredible putter consistently.
Yeah, and he said it. He was on an interview with Wyndham Clark at the Military Institute, not Military Institute, the Military Tribute, sorry. Military Institute. Yeah, Military Institute, BMI. It's probably actually around there, but anyway, another time. Denny McCarthy said in that interview when they asked to pick somebody's putting, pick somebody's driving, and pick someone's iron play, who they would do as a pro. And he picked Rory's driving. I forgot who was iron play, obviously. And then he picked himself on putting, not Jordan Spieth. He picked himself. So obviously he knows that he's really confident. However, he almost pulled a Kevin Na, who won the golf tournament, losing strokes to the green.
Well, that was
next level putting. But Denny McCarthy wasn't too far behind. He gained almost 10 strokes on the week. But when you look, he's done something similar to that. He's gained over a stroke. I can't get 14 times this year. It's per round. It's pretty insane. When you have that type of consistency, your ball striking doesn't have to be great for you to finish in the top 10. But I wonder if he has any type of ball striking that could actually get him into the top 5. That's what I'm concerned about. We saw him last week get into a tie for third late and not be able to come through. I think he hit it on the water on 17 or did something where he ended up making bogey and finishing, in that tie for 9. Little concerning, when you look at his stats, that the only time he's averaged, over a stroke on the approaches is twice this year, and it was at the Honda and the Byron. So really, and again, we're at 9,500 this week, right? We're not at 8,000. We're not at 7,800. That's what I'm concerned about.
That's the rub, because even if you look at his form, he's starting to find some consistency, and he's starting to put together, fringe top 20s. He did have a top 10 last week. But now the price is not you're not in the same category where you're playing a mid-range Denny McCarthy, hoping, hey, if he gives me an 18th, that's phenomenal. Now it's like, well, he needs to do a little more. And with a topsy turvy field like this, you can get away with it. But man, it is a little dicey. So when you can putt like that, you can always keep yourself in it. As you said, the ball striking doesn't need to be that crisp. But on the flip side, even if he gains only a couple strokes putting, now the pressure is really on because his ball striking is not nearly as good as guys like Sebastian Munoz, Kyle Stanley, right below Matt Jones, these type of players.
Yeah, and just a quick note, ownership did just drop if you're an AwesomeWeather.com Plus member. And as Ben and I kind of figured, it's Henrik Stenson leading the board there. And then it's actually Russell Henley and Scottie Scheffler right back to back there, just to mention the top three. So no surprise. And then Denny McCarthy as the fourth. Sorry, I want to mention that because we just talked about all three of those guys. Dr. Edmond, who we'll talk about in a bit, is mixed in there as well for the top five, which I'll give away there. So interesting. The ownership, because it's a field like this where it's rather weak, not surprising to see it pretty thinly spread out, though, with only maybe one or two guys getting over 20%, which is nice. If you're an MME guy and you want to go 40% and get that 2x, you're not putting your entire bank load into that.
No, a tournament like this, I do think ownership will be somewhat dispersed because there's not, it's hard to look at. Everyone feels overpriced basically, besides Doc Redman. He's the one guy that stood out in my mind. He's 7,200 in stronger fields. Other than that, everyone's a couple $1,000 probably where they should be. So such is life. But
and with that, he's been 7,200 almost this entire time. The entire fall swing where, interesting there. Also, another interesting note, we've had a guy 79 or 7,800 win the last 3 weeks in the fall season. So we're heading into that area. I know we skipped a little bit. But I want you to think of your top guy at 7,900 or 7,800. It's only four guys. But if we get it 4 weeks in a row, it's going to be one of them. So we'll get to them in a bit. I want you to tell me who you think is going to be the top to win. But before we do that, we'll head into the mid-9Ks. I want to talk to you about Sebastian Munoz. He just had his first win a couple of weeks ago, maintained that form and was able to finish 33rd 2 weeks ago, then missed the cut last week. Missed the cut off the tee numbers, looked really bad. I don't know if he spent some of that money that he had just won in Vegas or what it was, but he was relying on his putting. The numbers regressed tremendously. I'm not at all interested in 9,400.
I'm not really either. He's a guy, again, he's playing pretty well. He missed the cut on the number, but I've kind of been picking on him in head-to-head markets. I had him against Griot, and I pushed like a giant donkey, but that's neither here nor there. I'm with you kind of. I think the irons have cooled off a bit and the off the tee. So I naturally, with a guy like that, breakthrough win. He's been doing a lot of it with the putter. With the price elevated, I know, again, it's across the board, but I'm going to go with more, if I have to in this range, more known commodities. Guys like Stanley, Jones, Harris English, as we work down a little bit, who is, talk about a resurgence. He is gaining all over the place and consistently off the tee. I like him here if he can dial in the irons just a bit.
Yeah, and how about our guy? Let's just give him maybe 30 seconds here. Kyle Stanley gained 5 strokes in his 2-round at the Safeway on the approaches, and then gained another 8 last week at Shriners. 13 strokes gained on the approach in his last 6 rounds. Pretty impressive, but can't do anything else. Like nothing.
No, he literally just his putting is Denny McCarthy the opposite way, where you're just like, there's no chance that he doesn't lose 6 strokes putting. It makes it tough, especially because his short game isn't great either. But at the same time, Kyle Stanley is a damn good player. When he is in form, he's got good pedigree. I can make a case that he's even underpriced in a field like this relative to some of the names he's with.
Yeah, definitely if we're looking at the way that he can perform, and we know he can. 8th and 19th here, and 27 and 16th. So pretty good history to go on, which is likely why he's up at 9,300. I mean, his finishes have not even given close to that. You mentioned Harris English. Like you said, gaining off the tee super consistently. Even on his approaches, everything looks to be back in form. He even sent a tweet out that he was sad that he wasn't getting to play the Shriners because it seemed like he was in form due to a prior commitment. now back in Houston Open where he doesn't have good success. But that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be bad here, right? I mean, if he comes in and puts up these same ball striking numbers, he's not going to have trouble finding a good finish here.
I wouldn't think so. Harris English is a guy, and we see this a lot, especially in swing season, where if you think that he has found something, then you have a lot of bad data in there if you're going back a long way, because Harris English was god awful, and you want to throw that out. If you think that the long-term form is what we see, then he's clearly overvalued because you're relying on recent form that you don't think is going to stay. I tend to think that he has found him and Cameron Tringali right now, to me, are just playing. They're playing a little above their head, but at the same time, I think it's somewhat sustainable. So I'm willing to go to these guys even at elevated price tags, and kind of just see what happens rather than saying, you know what, this is just, this is a facade. This is smoke and mirrors. I'm not going to chase this.
Yeah, two guys in this range that have good course history. One of them a past champion in Matt Jones, and then you just mentioned Cam Tringale, top fives in 2015 and 14. Both guys not great statistically. Matt Jones last week lost strokes ball striking, gained 4 strokes with his putter. I really don't like to see that. You go look at his stats, and that's not what he relies on. So I'm not ready to go there. I am okay with Cam Tringale, but I think his numbers came down a little bit from the kind of the torrid pace that he was on at Travelers through the John Deere, where he was gaining, strokes ball striking with some of the best of them. Those numbers have come back a little bit. I'm okay with them. I guess I'm going to take the risk and jump back into the ocean with Luke List. What's wrong? What's wrong with me?
Dear God, I thought you were going to say Sam Ryder.
No, I'm going back to Luke List. I don't know why. Talk me out of it.
I'll just say this, and I'll just pass it right back to you.
Yeah.
I looked at Luke List. He came out of nowhere last week, and then I looked, and he gained 7.5 strokes with his short game. That's the one thing that alarms me. Now, off the tee, he's always traditionally pretty solid. The irons or whatever. I just worry. That was a lot of scrambling last week. Successful scrambling, incredible shots. I mean, when you're gaining 5 strokes around the green, that's some black magic style. So do you worry about that? Clearly, that's not the formula long term.
No, and not his formula really long term. That was the only thing that concerned me. Now, his approaches was really good at the Safeway. Gained a stroke and a half in those 2 rounds before missing the cut. Bounced back last week, and the numbers weren't great. He ended up losing 1.2 on the week. Because when he was going through his pace, when he came second at the Honda, not this year, the previous year, even this year he went through periods where he gained 5 or 6 in a row off the approaches. A little concerning, but I think that start at the Safeway and the 13th place there maybe got him back on track. He's never had a finish worse than 27th at this course. Obviously, a good setup for his length, being able to use it. So I think I might be a little bit early, but as I've stated a few times on this show, and I'll state it again tonight because there's one other guy in the field that I'm going to be early on. I think I'm early on Luke List here, and maybe it pays off, and maybe it doesn't. Maybe last week was the week to have.
I mean, you have to. We both on this show preach. I would rather be a couple weeks early and miss for a little while and then cash in than say, oh, Luke List came in 3rd at the Houston Open. Let me play him next week when he's popular and price is elevated. That's not how it works. Yeah. So there are other, Bud Cauley, Chad just mentioned, no problem with him. I have a feeling you're going to like this guy because you tend to like him more than me. Are you playing Carlos Ortiz?
Yeah, I looked at him, and he's that trio of guys that are really close together, Sebastian Munoz, Joaquin Niemann, and himself. Yeah, it was a good peek at the Sanderson when he was with Munoz in that last form the last 2 weeks. I've just kind of been middling, made the cut in both of them. 5th week in a row for him, but he's done after this week. He's not going to Asia. Only 81 points scored last week versus, somebody like Maverick McNeely who came in 42nd worst in the tournament, but put up 100 DraftKings points. I think for me, Ortiz might be a cash look because I think he's relatively consistent, but I haven't seen the upside in terms of DraftKings points. We go to look at Bo Hostler, who came in 29th, which is only 8 places, so probably 1 stroke difference. than Carlos Ortiz last week and had 10 more points DraftKings wise, which just means more birdies. I like Bo Hostler a lot this week too, but I'll preface it with I looked at Denny McCarthy and I looked at Bo Hostler and I said, okay, McCarthy's 9,500 and I'm getting 2.5 strokes gained putting, and I've got Bo Hostler at 8,300 and I'm getting a stroke and a half putting. So I went to Bo Hostler instead because I think there's a little bit more course comfortability there. He's obviously playing in front of home fans and friends. They're both similar players to me because they're gaining strokes with their short game, which is not the type of consistency we want to see. But I also think that keeps ownership really low. For example, on Bo Hostler, because he didn't have a great finish last week, he's coming in at about 6%, versus McCarthy's 15 or 16. I think they're similar type players in this regard.
I mean, Bo Hostler, we had said for a long time, if he didn't fix his irons, he's going to get in trouble. He didn't fix his irons, and he got in big trouble. Now, again, when you can putt like that, you can mask it for a while. He's got to be better. You can't lose 4 strokes on the approach. It just captures ceiling too much. But again, we've talked. There are formulas to do it, and when he doesn't do that, he's that much more dangerous with his abilities around the green because he is no doubt a very, very good putter. So I'm not sure any of these guys are going to be too popular because the next range is, I'm not going to say loaded, but there are names in terms of guys who have been paying you off if you've been playing them. And when that happens, people, especially in the swing season, just keep clicking the button. Why wouldn't you? And that's where I think a lot of ownership falls, right in the 8K, 7,900 range.
Definitely. And do you think that people, speaking of hot iron play, the opposite of Bo Hostler, and interesting to see where this guy comes out in terms of ownership this week, is Xingzun Zhang, and he's been very, very good. I've put him as one of my core plays this week. He had a bad first stint on the PGA Tour, just couldn't end up making it. Went back to the web last year, the Korn Ferry, and just totally dominated it. Interesting play this week. Looks like people aren't going to rush into him. I love him on this type of course where, he's not overly long, but he's not short. His proximity has been good. Everything checks out.
It really does. He's just playing good golf. It's a guy that I got onto last week a bit, and another quality showing at Shriners, 16th place finish. But the stats actually were more impressive than the result, in my opinion. Just gained across the board, putting pretty, a wash, not what you want to see, but he also didn't leak strokes. So I'm going to go back to him. And the thing I like is he's the same price as Lanto Griffin, who, I mean, I don't know what to make of this guy. He's just a top 20 machine right now. I don't know. I'm not really apt to chase that. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, it's double the ownership as well. Granted, Lanto has looked good. 13, 11, 17, 18 in his 4 starts. It's really good. He's paid off every single week. But it looks like people are going to jump into him this week. His price is up as well. He's actually in the pair, like you mentioned, with Robbie Shelton, Kevin Chappell, and himself. They're soaking up a lot of ownership, those 3 guys. I wouldn't be surprised to see, one of them, at least in a lot of lineups that you play against this week. Are you fading all 3? And if not, how do you rank the 3? Obviously Kevin Chappell's just coming back at that 59, but we know he's not quite back yet.
Not yet, but I'm willing to buy on Chappell. He's the kind of guy where I'm saying I want to be early because Chappell's going to get it together, and he's going to be, if he was in a different spot, he wouldn't be where he's priced in this field. We all know that. The guy I'm leaving out mostly is Lanto, and that's relative to the field. I do have a couple of shares, but I just couldn't get there, and maybe it'll burn me, and maybe he's better than I think. I think that mostly this is just a nice stretch that he's kind of hitting his ceiling. He's not going to kill me if he turns in another fine performance. I'll probably wish I had him, but I don't know how high that ceiling really is. So I'm moving to guys like Zhang, to Chappell. Your boy Robbie Shelton is right there, who I have no problem with him. He's probably behind those guys for me, but there's a lot of options if you don't want to go to Lanto.
Yeah, and Shelton battled last week to make the cut. Nice second round to bounce back and to stay in it. Ball striking numbers have been up and down. Gained close to 8, gained close to 4, lost, gained close to 5. So It's a bit up and down. Off the tee numbers has been consistent. His approaches was bad at Safeway. Yeah, I'm okay with Robbie Shelton. I think I don't. I'm not super convinced. I would rather play Zhang this week. I think he's been a little bit more consistent. But I'll definitely have some Shelton. I'll have some Chappell. And I'm probably going to fade Griffin again. I've been fading him. And I guess I'll just continue to. I'd rather go play, oh boy, Johnny Peak in Vegas at zero ownership. Here's the thing about Vegas. He loves to play in wet conditions. I don't know if it's something about getting the ball in his hand because obviously in wet conditions, normally it's lifting in place. But a couple of times he's popped in these wet conditions. Obviously, Houston got tons of water just 2 weeks ago. There was pictures of the course that was basically underwater. Now, granted, it can drain relatively quickly, but with the storm coming in on Friday, Johnny Vegas 7,600 low owned. I'm interested. Let's open up the make the cut segment here. Actually, our third segment. I think that's a perfect one to open up with. Johnny Vegas after his Vegas hangover on Thursday, where he shot 4 over, the worst score of the day. He bounced back on Friday a little bit. Is Vegas going to make your player pool, and is he going to make the cut?
Yeah, I have no problem with him. It's a guy that we know he can get hot in a hurry. He's done some things at the Players. He was fantastic. Some of these, not that this is a super technical course, but at the same time, you can't just blindly power through it. I do think that he'll garner a little more ownership maybe than we see, just because he's a Texas guy and people recognize the name compared to some of these other people, Bryce Garnett and the gang. So him and Landry kind of in that same bucket where Texas guys, kind of GPP flyers because the range of outcomes is gigantic.
Yeah, sure is. Landry approaches have looked good the last 2 weeks. Off the tee has looked good. Terrible putting last week. Another guy that's the opposite of that, that I'll throw at you for the make the cut segment is the ever just enigma of Tommy Lewis. Tommy Lee Lewis, not the Saints wide receiver there. Tom Lewis, the guy from England, just fifth place 2 weeks ago, 3 missed cuts in between, a win 6 weeks ago. Like, what the hell's going on with this guy?
This guy's actually been helping me a ton because I have a good pulse on him. I've been talking about shorting him in head-to-heads, and it's been working great. He's been missing cuts all over the place. Yep. Having said that, it's incredibly difficult because this is a guy kind of like I'm going to relate him to Austin Cook wildly, that he's been missing a lot of cuts, but when he doesn't miss the cut, he tends to actually really get in the mix. Yep. And that's someone I can blindly kind of, I don't want to say spray and pray, but I can take some shares just because I do think it justifies it rather than some of these guys where I feel like Brian Gay, for example. I feel like even if I get him right, he ends up in 55th. And it's just like, I'd rather have a guy miss the cut or have a higher equity at a top 20 than someone who maybe just grinds through the cut a little more often, but that ceiling's there. Now, Brian Gay gained 9 strokes putting last week, but I'm not banking on that once again. So him and Bjerregaard are in that weird range. Tricky because they're both very tough to break down, but I don't mind them as one-offs in an aggressive build.
Yeah, GPP focus for me, like in that $8, the $50K up top this week. I think Tom Lewis and Lucas Bjerregaard are fine in those. They're not going to make my main lineups this week. I just can't buy into their non-consistency. But for an $8 GPP, I'm okay giving them probably somewhere close to 10 to 15% ownership. If I'm MMEing. Because when they make the cut, they're almost a lock to be inside the top 25, which, top 25 isn't going to win you the $8 likely, but it's going to maybe win you the $44. Plus, they can put up points and get hot in a hurry. We saw Bjerregaard last year. We've seen Tom Lewis do it in the last couple of weeks. Fifth place, like I said, 2 weeks ago at the European, what was it, Spain? No, the one before Spain.
What?
Where Tommy Lewis came in fifth. It was the one
before.
Dunhill, yeah, there we go. And that's just what he does. It's weird. Another guy that kind of fits this mold of being real hot and cold last week, DePaul crushed him. And we talked about this guy. We talked about Sam Burns and Keith Mitchell right at that price getting owned by the greens. And it happened again with Burns last week. Now he's back on Bermuda. Off the tee and approaches have been okay. Does he get through the weekend?
So he's someone I don't know what again, he was an interesting case because he got hurt at the end of the year. He broke an ankle, or so I heard. Then he came back for swing season. I was kind of surprised. And you were right. The putter went cold, but the thing that I'm worried about is his irons have been really bad lately. And that's not something that not that he's been a stellar iron player. In fact, he's had some struggles, but it wasn't a super leak. And lately it's just been derailing any good that he's done. So I'm going to wait and see and kind of, just look elsewhere. I know you can always justify some of these high upside guys, but for me, he actually is not even in the player pool.
How about a guy that came up in so many different screeners for me this week? So I'm forced to play him. We saw him come second 4 weeks ago, which was, I think, his best ever PGA Tour finish. Tom Hoge at 7,400. Is he going to make the cut for you this week? His approaches have looked good, except for the Safeway. And is he in your player pool?
Probably not. I will say, shout out to Kyle in chat, who is the Tom Hoge whisperer, because he comes in chat and he always says to play Tom Hoge. And then I look at the leaderboard and Tom Hoge's like 9 under through 12 holes. It's like, probably should have taken that a little more seriously. But this is a course where I do think that scrambling is going to come into play a little more than usual, especially from what we've seen in these birdie fests. I'm not there. The guy that I want to talk about is right next to him. It's Brendan Steele, who is my dark horse of the week. I think that he sets up pretty well here where he can lean on his off the tee game. And the game overall is starting to creep back after a horrible stretch of golf.
Yeah, really bad, right? I mean, the ball striking numbers, there was a time where he was just losing it. Seemed like every week. Yeah, last week it kind of bounced back, both off the tee and on the approach. So interesting. He was going to be my next guy for the make the cut. Does he make it? You say yes. I'm going to go with yes as well. I like Tom Hoge also as well to make the cut. Certainly hope so. Like you just said about Steele, I certainly hope so about Hoge. Now, how about a guy that was popular last week, and that's why he's priced at 7,400. In fact, his miscut, not going to lie to you, helped me in one of the contests, the lower contest, the $300. There was like 14 entries, I think. He was owned by like 6 entries, which was really weird. How that ended up happening, how he landed on so many people's radar at that price. But price increase up to 7,400. Everything kind of looked bad except for off the tee last week. Can he bounce back? Is he in your pool? Does he make the weekend? So a lot of different questions there.
I think he does enough to kind of get through. Now, someone like Steele, I'm kind of allocating the shares in this range, but at the same time, we're not going to find a ton of security. I already told you I don't like burns. So there's limited options. And as we work down even a little more, I don't have a ton of guys that I feel great about, Doc Redman notwithstanding, but everybody wants to play him. So maybe I will work a guy like that into the pool, but not a priority.
Yeah, I think it's a perfect time to chat about him for a little bit, Doc Redman. He's going to be really popular, but 42nd last week, but put up 90 DraftKings points, had a really good weekend. The putter, though, is really cold right now. Excuse me. 4 straight starts where he's lost strokes.
I mean, that's the kind of thing that it's going to be dicey as we work through it. And when you're relying, I mean, take Grillo as the extreme example. Like if you're relying purely on ball striking, it can only take you so far. You just have to believe that he can find something. And we know putting is certainly one of the flukier things in golf. Crazy stuff happens, but you got to make putts, especially with the mentality nowadays. If you're not shooting 18, 20 under, you're not going to get there, and you can't do that just on ball striking.
No, you certainly can't. Another guy for our Make the Cut segment that has had a pretty good fall with 2 top 15s, 3 or 4 made cuts. Homeless Hubbard, Mark Hubbard. Does he make the weekend for 4 out of 5 in the fall swing?
So here's a guy that, he had been around, lost his card, worked back off the Corn Ferry Tour, and he's making the most, I'd say, of the swing season. He didn't make the cut at Sanderson Farms. He grabbed the top 10 at Greenbrier. He was 13th at Safeway, and he's been doing it mostly with the irons. Had an explosive putting week out in California. But this is someone that, he kind of knows his game inside and out. We know what he can do. My big concern about him is, can he hold up off the tee? That's the weak link of his game. I worry about that at this course in particular. It's still low enough price-wise at a course where he's had a little success for me to take some shares.
Yeah, I think I think that makes sense. Zach Blair had a really bad week last week, fourth the week before that based on his putting. Does he make the weekend this week, or is his run for a little while done?
Yeah, I'm not there. Zach Blair hits it like he's in the Tim Wilkinson bucket of like if there's some like trees before the fairway, he might not be able to reach. Distance could be an issue for Zach. He's a great putter, but no, I'm not there for him. Good to see him back on tour though. I like that guy.
Yeah, he's pretty quality and loves the game of golf and likes golf course and all that fun stuff. One guy that had a nice bounce back week after one of the worst miscuts I have seen from a rookie in a real long time. Matthew Neesmith, you remember what he did 2 weeks ago at the Safeway? He was 600 day one, was 600 still on his 12th hole and shot played 5 over in to miss the cut. Bounced back nicely, almost scored 100 points last week. I was on him. He, in fact, him and Christopher Ventura, who's priced right there as well. I'll throw both these names at you. I had them together in a lineup that made it to second place on Fanduel in the $3. So they were both paid off very well for me. Christopher Ventura made so many putts outside of 15 feet. I really thought it was Jordan Spieth putting last week because I've never seen it before other than Spieth. Does that scare you, even though Ventura can really bomb it?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely. Yeah, I mean, he did gain 10 strokes putting, so that's never ideal. That's a guy and this is the danger of swing season. I had a profile of what I thought he was going to be, and so far it's early. It's not what I anticipated. His irons are terrible. And that's not what I thought we were going to see from this guy. His scrambling is also horrendous. So that's a lethal combo. When you can't hit the green and then you can't scramble, you better be able to putt. So I'm not exactly apt to go to him. I do have a couple names that I want to throw out at you as we work down. The first is Cameron Davis, who I get myself into trouble with this guy every single week. This is my true one percenter because he's not going to be remotely popular. 10th in driving distance last year, loves par fives. He's starting to get not consistency in making cuts, but he's starting to get a little more upside to his game. He was 22nd to end the season at Wyndham, then he was 28th at Sanderson Farms, some missed cuts sandwiched in between. But his best clubs are driving the ball. So I'm interested to see how he ends with the rest of swing season. This is a guy I was really disappointed with his 18-19 season. He didn't do as much as I thought he could.
Yeah, he definitely didn't. I had him as I think number 4 on my Corn Ferry Tour grads from the previous year. Just thought he was much better than what he came out to be. He was highly decorated. Yeah, if you are an Osmo.com Plus member and you're follow along in my model, I make 2. I have my base one and then the make your own model where you can change all the qualifications for it and whatnot. And he's actually the biggest differential between the model rank and the make your own. So obviously there's something that's liking him, whether it's odds or OWGR. Something's liking him. So stuff like that in a field like this, I'm just like, okay, I'll play him. I'll put him at 10% and just see what happens. Do I think he makes the cut this weekend? Yeah, I think he does make the cut this weekend because, like you said, I think there's maybe a little bit emphasis on driving distance. Maybe not so strokes gained off the tee, but certainly driving distance. Yeah, I know, right? I'll play a little bit of Cam Davis this week. Did you say Ventura and Neesmith are both going to make the cut, by the way?
Ventura, I'm out on. Neesmith, yeah. I really have no opinion of. I've seen his name around, and honestly, if I had to play one of them, it would be him. Ventura, God, I still look at him, though, and I want to play just because of the pedigree that I thought, but I need to temper those expectations a bit. So I'm really not too into either of them, but I see chat talking about, I guess it is my boy, Sean Stefani. I want to talk about him. This is a guy, I have a betting article on the site. I bet him at 150 to 1 to win this tournament. So I clearly like him. Not saying he's going to do that, but he can get hot with the irons. He's a Texas guy, and the form has been very consistent. 6 out of 7 dating back to last year in terms of made cuts. Was 28th at Sanderson Farms. I think it's just a quality lower end range play, and that if he gets it going, you never know. Maybe he can grab a piece of a top 20 or something like that.
Sure. A couple of other guys' names down here. How about Patton? Oh, Jesus. Kazir? Sorry, Patton. I always
Bad
pronounce
guy.
your, yeah, I think it's Kazir, if I'm not mistaken. Anyways, uh, I look at the screener and everything seems either green or yellow. That's because he hasn't been playing well. Off the tee was, he lost 0.15, but that was actually one of his better off the tee rounds of the entire year. The most he's gained all year is 0.35 per round at the Travelers. That's really bad. He is another guy that relies on his short game, his putting to get by. Any interest in 7,000 this week?
I mean, this is a guy he showed, I think that was a couple years ago, he can get crazy hot, and he ripped off a couple of wins in a short period of time. His driving is, I'm not gonna say it's Wesley Bryan territory, but it's not. He's not that far away. Like, he consistently loses off the tee. I have a tough time going to a guy like that. The form isn't there. The off the tee game isn't there. I'll let other people. There are other egregious, shady names that can putt that I'd rather go to.
Speaking of shady names that normally can putt, except the last time he was out, his irons look really good, actually. 2 of the last 3, he's gained over 4. Talk about Dominic Bazzelli, 6,800. Also pretty good proximity from over 200. What say you about Dominic Bazzelli? Just fits that mold that we were just talking about?
That's right, the Boz man. Now, this guy gets dangerously hot with the putter, but it's not like he's an elite ball striker by any stretch. He's just a little better and a little more consistent in terms of not giving you much, but at least setting. I'll say this: there are a couple guys in this field where my goal is, don't lose it with the ball striking. And if I luck box 10 strokes putting with them, they're elite putters, so be it. But if you're so bad off the tee, it doesn't matter. If you have 15 foot for bogey, that's not really going to get done if you make it. And I think Bazzelli is one of the guys. His ball striking will be good enough to give him a chance that if he gets hot on the greens, he could put in a good performance here.
Yep, totally agree. So let's get so we're at 9:53. So I got 2 guys that I really want to cover with you. You know that I love these younger kids that are coming out with potential. And there's actually 3 this week. I had to add one in that I didn't really know about. And then we're going to give our really quick takes about the Italian Open, just to mix things up. Like I said, 5K up top from Draftkings. So I like that. I like a European Tour sweat. So I'll play a little bit over there this week. First name, Brandon Wu, Stanford grad, made the cut at the U.S. Open, came T30, missed the cut in his first professional start in the European Tour at the Alfred Dunhill, but not really a setup that I like for Wu. But gets his first sponsor exemption. He has been going toe-to-toe with Morikawa the last 4 years and beating him sometimes. So obviously when we see Morikawa come up and win on the PGA Tour, I'm apt to say, okay, what's up with this Brandon Wu guy? So 6,700. He waited to turn pro so he could play in the Walker Cup. That's my last statement about him. Is he on your radar this week? He's definitely on there radar.
No, he's not on mine. I let you do this part of the show with Isaiah Salinda or whoever the hell that was.
Yeah.
For me, it would be Zach Sucher or someone like that I've seen a little bit. Doug Gim, who's, I wait for you to announce these guys, then I observe. Like now, John Oda's in my repertoire. So Brandon Wu, I'll say this. It's a name that I have kept an eye on just because we've saw him in a couple majors, and as you said, he's got some amateur pedigree. I'll let him see how he goes, and maybe I'll hop on in the near future, but nothing right now.
Speaking of pedigree in the amateur world, we've got the number 2 amateur in the world player here. He's a Texas guy. He goes to Texas. He just played on that Walker Cup team with Brandon Wu, and that's Cole Hammer. Hammer time. 6,400 this week. I am interested in him as well.
So now, this is right after I give my nice little rant about I don't play these creative players.
Yeah.
Cole Hammer, to me, based on honestly nothing, I think he's good enough to garner some interest. I have a little exposure to him. Now I'm keeping it reasonable because it's a guy, again, I don't know much of, but he's got, as you mentioned, he's a top amateur in the world. He's a Texas guy. He is someone, I think there is a range of outcomes where in the near future, he can get on tour and hit the ground running pretty fast, like we've seen some of those top end guys. So in that case, I'm going to try to say he can find a weekend even as an amateur. And when I'm in a jam, I did look to him a little in this really low range.
Third guy, and this is probably one that I had to look him up, and maybe other people did as well. Chandler Phillips. He's sixth ranked amateur in the world. Yeah, this is what I mean. He just turned pro. He missed the cut back at the Sanderson. I don't know. I'll have to go look and maybe got a sponsor exception. But when I look at his statistical profile, he lost 4 strokes putting those 2 days. Off the tee, gained 1.37. Approach basically matched the field around the green, gained strokes. Came in 12th 2 weeks ago. I just can't find out where that was.
Most of it. Municipal course.
Yeah, I wonder if I don't know what it is. So went to Texas A&M just to finish up on it. Went to Texas A&M, 6th ranked amateur in the world coming here. So obviously he has some pedigree of being 6th ranked in the world in the amateur. So maybe I'll play a little bit of him. Obviously he's really excited to be able to play. Looks like it's his home PGA Tour event is what his Twitter is saying. So I'm interested a little bit this week. I'm not going to be.
I'm not looking at where I'm like, oh, I got to get to these guys up top. Let me play someone who may or may not be a real person. I don't need to because I didn't want the extra salary. I was more about, let me try to balance this out. And maybe I dip down here so I can take more guys in that 8 and 9K range. But I just really didn't have many builds where I jammed up top and needed,
needed one of these guys.
Yeah, most likely not. So that really, Rich Beam is in this tournament.
Yeah.
All right.
The Beam. So 2 names that are names that we're not used to seeing in a field like this, be below 7K. Talked about them briefly last week, and you and I both said we're waiting on both. James Hahn and Graham Dillette coming back from injury. Graham Dillette actually gained on his approaches, so good to see that, but everything else was terrible. And James Hahn made the cut and looked pretty good, actually. Faded on the weekend, which is not a surprise. His first tournament back. He faded a little bit on the 4-day thing. Are those in play for – I know chat looks like they just mentioned James Hahn. Interested in either of those guys this week?
James Hahn, I think, is fine. I'm probably not going to get to him just because, again, I don't need to go down there. And I do think, all in all, you kind of mentioned it, even though he made the cut, I'm not sure 72 holes is really in there in terms of consistency. Graham Dillette looked like he needed to work on some things, which is to be expected when you don't play for 2 years. And that's really where I'll leave it with him. So Stuart Sink, I just saw them mention real quick. No strong opinion. He likes the course. Game is pretty standard. He's always like he feels like a pseudo cash play.
Yeah, and he's got that new caddy on the bag. He's caddy for Austin Cook, Kip Henley. Okay, so the last week, my John Oda was my hot take. He made the cut, but didn't do anything. Can't recall yours off the top of my head.
Something about Aaron Wise, so it couldn't have been good.
Oh, it was something about Aaron Wise. So, okay, we'll just move past that. All right, quickly, let's just move on to the Italian Open, then we'll give our hot takes. First thing I want to mention, Paul Casey is priced more than Justin Rose. Surprised?
A little. To tell you the truth, it's not. I didn't focus a ton on it. I'll just give 2 thoughts, and then we can get out of here with a hot take or 2.
Yeah.
The tree line course, obviously Molinari. Guido is everywhere I look. People are all over him. There's some guys. There's some pedigree out there. I think you want those guys that can keep it. Molinari really is the blueprint for what you would want at a course like this, in my opinion. Matt Wallace. Yeah,
Matt Wallace, Matt Fitzpatrick even. He's maybe not quite long enough to win.
Max Kuiper.
Yeah, Max Kuiper. The one play that I'll give way down low that's played pretty well recently, or at least in their little fall swing before missing the cut at the Dunhill, is Gavin Green, 7,100. It's priced like the same price as Julian Surrey, who's been really, really bad. Scrivener, also Jason Scrivener, he had a good week last week. And then Kurt Kitayama, who looked like he was about to make the cut over here and just totally blew up. He's back on the European tour. So
the Schwab is going to win eventually.
When's that going to happen? What is he? Is he in the field? Not in the field. Okay.
No, I didn't see him, but he's still just the man. There's a guy named, speaking of Logan McCracken. Who the hell is that?
Oh, yeah. All right. So we can we'll end with that. There was 4. He's a Monday qualifier. He's one of the Monday qualifiers. So I wanted to do something different with the hot takes. I want you to tell me, unless you have one off the top of your head that you wanted to say.
I'm thinking of one as we speak.
Okay, so my thought was I've got Logan McCracken and Andy Zhang and George Cunningham and Jeremy Gandon as your Monday qualifiers. Then I've got 6 sponsors exemptions that have Cole Hammer and Brandon Wu. I want you to take, of those 6 guys, take the one that finishes best.
You know what? I'll go a little against the grain.
Okay.
Because I think Cole Hammer probably would be the answer. Mm-hmm. But Brandon Wu is someone who, if he played well this week, even though I don't think I'm going to have him in my lineups, I wouldn't be I wouldn't be like, where did this guy come from? He seems to have some game from what I can tell. So yeah, if I had to take a made up person, I certainly would pay him over. Logan McCracken is not a person that I've ever heard of, so I'm not going to.
Yeah, he's grinding the mini tours. Andy Zhang is a 21-year-old from China, and then George Cunningham actually made the cut last year at the Shriners, came in 37th. So I don't know. I'll take Brandon Wu as well.
Okay.
Okay, so go ahead with your hot take, and then I'll get mine.
All right, my hot take. God, before in the show I had one, and then I think I forgot what it was. If something like Scrabble related, I was getting real sick in the head.
Ooh.
It would have been a good one too, and now my life is over. What I'm gonna say is that I know what. You know what? I'm gonna go back to the original hot take, and this is in my betting article. I think that Brandon Steele can grab a top 10 here. It's about 7 to 1ish. I got it 6.5 to 1. It's a guy. We've seen him win twice at Safeway. I'm not saying this is Safeway, but he's got some talent. The game is starting to creep back. I think this could be a springboard for what could be a good rebound season for him.
Okay, I like it. I mean, the stats would certainly suggest that there's an opportunity for that. All right, I've got mine. I know what it is. It has been a long time, since week 26 of the 2017-2018 season, since Blow Hostler has had a top 10 on the PGA Tour. That was the Quicken Loans National. Prior to that, the Travelers came in second, and that was a couple months prior. He had the Houston Open, second place finish, the Ian Poulter. I think he gets done this week. Top 10 for Blow Hostler. He's back, I hope. He was one of those guys coming out of college that had a ton of talent and just hasn't materialized. Blow Hostler, top 10 this week.
Okay. I respect that. I like that. We did it. Houston Open, everybody. I will say before we get out of here, Chad, as always, it's fun hanging out with you. If you click the like button on your way out, we would appreciate it. If you want to hang out with us more, we have all different types of packages. Try us out for a week if you don't want to commit. Just come in, hang out in Slack, and see what's what. We got projections. We got ownership. We got rankings. We got office hours, which I just held. And that's just for golf. We have every other sport, of course. So we hope you come in and try us out, if nothing else. We did it. Good luck, everyone. We will be back next Wednesday doing it all over, but hopefully with a better field. So on that note, we're going to get out of here, and we will see you next week.